My daughter told me I needed her husband's permission to enter the lake house I had built with money from my late husband's life insurance. I did not argue. I looked at the brass key hanging beside my kitchen door and understood that someone had been quietly rewriting the meaning of ownership inside my own family. It happened on a Tuesday evening in early June. I was standing at the stove in my home in Athens, stirring chicken and barley soup, while an old song Thomas used to love played softly from the radio. The kitchen smelled of thyme, onions, and warm bread. Nothing about the evening felt important until my phone rang. Rachel's name appeared on the screen. "Mom," she said quickly, "I wanted to tell you that you don't need to come to the lake house for the 4th of July." For a moment, I thought I had misheard her. "Evan invited his parents and his brother," she continued. "He thinks this holiday should just be for our household and the kids. You can probably come later in the month, depending on Evan's schedule." I lowered the wooden spoon. "Evan's schedule?" Rachel sighed as if I had interrupted a meeting. "He's under a lot of pressure at work. He needs time to relax without extra tension." Extra tension. I looked across the kitchen at the brass key. It hung from a small wooden hook Thomas had installed years before he became sick. The key belonged to the cottage near Lake Oconee, the house whose deed, insurance, taxes, permits, and mortgage-free title carried only my name. I kept my voice calm. "Rachel, are you telling me I need your husband's permission to visit a house that belongs to me?" Silence filled the line for several seconds. Then she said, "Mom, you're making this more uncomfortable than it needs to be." There was no apology, no hesitation, no sign that she understood how strange her words sounded. "Love you," she added. The call ended before I could answer. I did not cry, not then. What hurt was not losing a holiday weekend. I had spent enough years working emergency rooms to know that plans changed and people disappointed one another. What hurt was the casual certainty in my daughter's voice. She spoke as if authority over the house had already passed from me to Evan, and everyone had accepted the transfer except the woman whose name was on every legal document. I turned off the stove and sat at the kitchen table. For months, I had explained away every small intrusion. It was only a curtain, only a desk moved into the guest room, only a few framed photographs taken down from the mantel, only my gardening tools pushed into the outer shed. Families shared space. I had told myself, families did not count every chair, every cabinet, every favor, but only had become a language of surrender. One curtain had become a room. One room had become a schedule. And now that schedule had become permission to enter my own property. I walked to the hallway cabinet and removed the large blue folder where I kept the lake house records. At the table, I opened it to the recorded deed. There was one owner, Marianne Elaine Cole. I traced my name with one finger, not because I had forgotten it, but because someone else apparently had. It had taken me nearly 2 years to build that house. Until that Tuesday night, I had not understood that it had taken them less than 2 years to erase me from it in their minds. The paper had not changed. The locks had not changed. But something in our family already had. The deed in the blue folder proved that the lake house belonged to me. But a deed could not explain why the place mattered so much, or why the thought of losing it felt like losing Thomas all over again. Thomas and I were married for 34 years. We were never wealthy, but we were careful. He worked as an accountant. I worked as an emergency room nurse. And we learned early how to stretch every paycheck without making life feel small. We packed lunches, drove reliable cars until they could no longer be repaired, and saved a little from every month, even when the amount seemed almost meaningless. Thomas kept a black notebook in the drawer beside our bed. Inside, He sketched houses he knew we could not yet afford. None of them were grand. His favorite had 3 bedrooms, a wide porch facing a lake, a stone fireplace, and a kitchen window positioned to catch the morning sun. In one corner of the living room, he always drew a deep chair beside a shelf. "That's your reading spot," he would tell me. "And where do you sit?" "Wherever I can still see you." We used to talk about building that house after retirement. Then, Thomas developed cancer, and the future became a calendar of appointments, medication schedules, insurance calls, and long drives home from treatment. The notebook disappeared into a box while we learned to measure time in test results. After he died, I did not collapse in any dramatic way. I paid the bills. I returned the medical equipment. I answered sympathy cards. I went grocery shopping and remembered to take out the trash. For almost a year, I completed each day without truly living inside it. I found the notebook while clearing a closet one rainy afternoon. On the last page, beneath a rough drawing of the porch, Thomas had written, "A good home should make people feel welcome, never obligated." It was not a prophecy. Thomas had written versions of that belief throughout our marriage. He thought hospitality should be offered freely and received gratefully. Still, seeing the sentence in his handwriting made something inside me move again. I decided to finish the dream. I used the proceeds from Thomas's life insurance policy, part of the money from selling the family house that had become too large for me, and savings from more than 30 years of nursing near Lake Oconee. I found a little over 2 wooded acres with a gentle slope toward the water. The house I planned was not a mansion. It was a 3-bedroom cottage with 2.5 bathrooms, a wraparound porch, a modest stone fireplace, and the kitchen window Thomas had drawn so many times. I did not hand the project to someone else and hope for the best. I interviewed contractors, viewed architectural drawings, studied bids, checked insurance requirements, met with the permitting office, spoke with the bank, and had a real estate attorney review every document before I signed it. I knew what the land cost. I knew which account paid every invoice. I knew exactly whose name appeared on the deed. Construction took nearly 2 years. On the morning the final inspection passed, the builder placed the first key in my hand. I opened the front door alone. The room smelled of fresh wood and paint. I carried Thomas's notebook into the kitchen and set it on the windowsill. Sunlight spilled across the floor exactly where he had imagined it. "We did it, Tom," I whispered. The first summers were everything I had hoped for. Rachel and Evan came with Lily and Noah. Nathan arrived with his wife. We cooked together, paddled across the quiet water, played cards on the porch, and stayed outside until mosquitoes drove us indoors. One morning, Rachel wrapped her arms around me beside the kitchen window. "Dad would be proud of you," she said. I believed her. At that moment, I mistook gratitude for permanence and affection, for proof that the boundaries between love and ownership would always remain perfectly clear. Before they left that weekend, I gave Rachel a spare key. It was meant for visits we had discussed, emergencies, and weekends when I had invited them to arrive before me. "Don't make me regret trusting you," I joked. Rachel closed her fingers around the key and smiled. "Never." Looking back, the taking did not begin with a lawyer, a changed lock, or a demand for ownership. It began with one small sentence. "Mom, Evan thinks the room would work better this way." At first, Evan's changes were small enough to sound reasonable. One Friday afternoon, while we were unloading groceries, He stood in the doorway of the smallest bedroom and said, "Marianne, would you mind if I used this room as an office on weekends? Just temporarily." I looked at the narrow bed, the reading lamp, and the quilt Rachel had slept under as a teenager. "As long as nothing permanent changes," I said. "Of course," he replied. "I only need a quiet place for calls." The next time I arrived, the bed had been pushed against the wall. 2 computer monitors covered a new desk. A printer sat beneath the window, metal filing cabinets filled one corner, and a polished sign bearing the name Mercer Commercial Renovations hung beside the door. On the desk lay several envelopes addressed to Evan's company at my lake house address. "Why is your business mail coming here?" I asked. Evan barely looked up from his screen. "Just for convenience." Rachel, standing behind him, gave me a small smile that asked me not to make an issue of it. A few weeks later, I noticed the framed photograph of Thomas, and I was missing from the mantel. So were 2 pictures of the children when they were young. I found them wrapped in newspaper inside a cardboard box in the hall closet. Thomas's black notebook lay beneath them. Rachel followed me into the room. "The living room looks cleaner without so many old things," she said. "I thought you'd like it." I carried the photographs back to the mantel and placed the notebook beside them. "Do not move my belongings again without asking me." Her expression tightened. "We were only trying to help." The changes did not stop. My gardening tools were moved from the shed into a small storage box outside, so Evan could keep fishing equipment there. The refrigerator filled with food Rachel preferred, while the tea and preserves I kept for myself disappeared one Saturday. I arrived to find 3 men I had never met using my boat. Evan introduced them as potential clients. "You invited business guests here?" I asked. "It's only for the afternoon," he said. "They love the place." That evening, Lily ran through the kitchen carrying a towel and shouted, "I love our lake house!" I smiled at her, then asked gently, "Who told you it was yours, sweetheart?" She answered without hesitation, "Dad says one day all of this will be ours." Children do not understand the weight of adult promises. They simply repeat them. After dinner, I asked Rachel and Evan to sit with me at the table. I kept my voice calm. "This is a place for family," I said. "But it is not family property. It belongs to me. From now on, nothing in this house changes unless you ask first." Evan leaned back and gave a quiet laugh. "We're only helping the house function better. The house functioned perfectly well before you began managing it." Rachel folded her arms. "Mom, you're turning a small misunderstanding into a conflict." "No," I said. "I am stopping a pattern before it becomes one." Evan glanced toward Rachel as if I had embarrassed them both. As he gathered papers from the table, one envelope slipped to the floor. The words "Final Notice" were printed across the front beneath the name of a regional bank. Beside it was a property valuation report with a photograph of my lake house clipped to the cover. Evan picked them up quickly and turned the valuation face down. I did not reach for either document. I did not read what was not mine to read. But I remembered them. Memory, I would learn, can become its own evidence. That night, after everyone went to bed, I sat alone on the porch and asked myself why I had continued allowing them to use the house after so many boundaries had been crossed. The answer was not weakness. I was afraid Rachel would believe I had never accepted her husband. I wanted Lily and Noah to grow up with summers by the water. After Thomas died, crowded dinners and noisy weekends had become proof that our family was still whole. But I was beginning to understand the price I had been paying for that proof. I had traded control for closeness and called it generosity. A few weeks later, a white envelope from a law office appeared in my mailbox. My full name was typed correctly on the front. The wishes inside it, however, were not mine. The envelope contained a draft agreement, not a family letter. According to the document, the lake house would be transferred into a family property. LLC, Rachel and Evan would serve as managers. I would retain the right to use the house for the rest of my life, while they would handle maintenance, taxes, insurance, and future decisions. The wording was polished and reassuring. It described the arrangement as a way to simplify estate planning, preserve the property for future generations, and avoid unnecessary court proceedings after my death. Then I reached the sentence that changed everything. Mrs. Marianne Cole has agreed in principle to the proposed transfer. I read it twice. I had agreed to nothing. I called the law office immediately. The attorney who answered sounded surprised when I explained who I was. After confirming my identity, he told me Evan had contacted the firm several weeks earlier. Evan said I wanted to organize my assets before the end of the year, that I did not want my children to go through probate, and that I had authorized him to begin the preliminary work. That information is false, I said. I never gave him permission to speak for me. The attorney became careful and formal. He apologized, said no documents had been filed, and promised to close the matter at once. By the end of the day, he emailed me copies of Evan's messages and the information Evan had provided. I printed everything. Then I wrote one email to Rachel and Evan. I instructed them to stop all activity involving the property. They were not to use the lake house address for Evan's business, change furniture or fixtures, invite guests without my permission, or contact any attorney, bank, or financial advisor regarding the house. I also asked them to return the spare key within 7 days. Rachel called less than 10 minutes later. "Mom, this is an overreaction. Your husband told a lawyer I had agreed to transfer my property. He was trying to help." "No, I was trying to create authority." "I never gave him," Evan replied by email instead of calling. "This is only about protecting the property from probate and unnecessary taxes." I answered with one sentence. "No one protects my property by lying that I agreed to let them control it." 3 days later, I drove to Lake Oconee to inspect the house myself. My brass key entered the lock, but it would not turn. I tried again. Then I noticed the new electronic keypad mounted above the handle and a camera fixed beneath the porch light. I called Rachel. After a long pause, she admitted Evan had changed the locks because a nearby house had been burglarized. "For security," she said. "Security from whom? The woman whose name is on the deed?" Rachel exhaled sharply. "I'll send you the new code after I ask Evan." Those 6 words ended something inside me. After I ask Evan. My daughter believed her husband's permission mattered more than mine at property I owned. I did not sit in my car and drive home pretending there had been another misunderstanding. I photographed the new lock, the keypad, and the camera. Through the garage window, I could see Evan's vehicle parked inside. Through another window, I saw filing boxes stacked against the office wall. Then I called Laura Bennett, a real estate attorney Nathan had recommended. Laura asked direct questions. Did Rachel and Evan own another home? Yes. Did they have a lease? No. Did they pay rent? No. Were the utilities, taxes, and insurance in their names? No. Did they receive ordinary personal mail there, or use it as their primary residence? No. Only Evan's business mail had appeared. Laura listened before answering. "Your generosity gave them access," she said. "It did not give them ownership." She told me not to force my way inside that evening. Instead, She asked me to bring identification, the recorded deed, insurance records, and recent utility bills to her office the next morning by sunrise. I had every document arranged in the blue folder. A few hours later, I returned to the lake house with Laura and a licensed locksmith. I believed I was going there to reclaim a door. I did not yet know that behind it waited for evidence of a larger plan. Laura arrived carrying a certified copy of the recorded deed. The locksmith asked to see my driver's license, the insurance policy, and the utility bills before he touched the door. A county deputy stood near the patrol car at the edge of the driveway. Laura had requested his presence only to prevent a confrontation if Rachel or Evan appeared. I laid the deed across the hood of my car. The locksmith studied it, then looked at me. "Who owns the property?" "Only me." He nodded and began working. Within 20 minutes, the electronic lock had been reset. Evan's access code disappeared from the system. The camera account was transferred to my phone, and the locksmith handed me 2 new keys sealed in a small envelope. The metal felt cold in my palm. For the first time in days, the house recognized me again. The deputy witnessed the change without entering the house. Nothing was forced, hidden, or improvised. Every step rested on documents bearing my name. I had spent months being treated like an intruder. The law restored the boundary my family ignored. Laura stopped me before I crossed the threshold. "Photograph everything," she said. "Do not throw away anything belonging to Rachel or Evan. Make an inventory. Keep their property secure, and give them written notice explaining when they can collect it." I followed her instructions room by room. The kitchen cabinets had been rearranged. Several of my dishes had been boxed. Fishing equipment crowded the storage area where my gardening tools had once stood. In the living room, the large desk Evan had installed blocked the reading corner Thomas had designed for me. I found our photograph face down in a cardboard box. Beneath several business folders lay Thomas's black notebook. I lifted it carefully, brushed dust from the cover, and placed it on the chair. Then I noticed an open file on Evan's desk. I did not search through a drawer or open a sealed envelope. The first page was already exposed beneath the desk lamp. At the top was the name Mercer Commercial Renovations. Below it was a proposed bridge loan for $350,000. The listed collateral was the Lake Oconee property, my property. The estimated value was just under $1 million. The anticipated closing date was the following Friday. A copy of my deed had been attached, and my name was highlighted in yellow. On a sticky note beside it, someone had written, "Transfer first, then collateral approval." The room seemed to grow smaller around me. Evan had not been trying to preserve a vacation home for future generations. He needed control of it to keep his company alive. The final notice I had seen, the valuation report, the business mail, and the pressure to form an LLC were not separate inconveniences. They were parts of one plan. If the property moved into the company structure he proposed, he could present it as available collateral. The loan might cover payroll, overdue suppliers, and whatever other problems he had hidden. It might also keep him from risking the house he and Rachel actually owned. And Rachel might not know how close everything was to collapse. I sat in the reading corner with Thomas's notebook against my knees. A home should make people feel welcome, never obligated. Evan had reduced the dream my husband never lived to see into a line on a loan application. My generosity had become, in his mind, an obligation to rescue a company I had never been told was failing. I wanted to call Rachel immediately. I wanted to ask whether she knew my home had been offered to a bank before she even owned 1 inch of it. Instead, I called Nathan. He listened without interrupting. Then his voice lowered. I heard Evan say something months ago. He said, once the house is transferred to Rachel, everything gets easier. I thought he meant the inheritance someday. Why didn't you tell me? I didn't want to create trouble between you and Rachel. I'm sorry. I looked around the room at everything we had all mistaken for peace. Your silence did not cause this, I said. But silence gave it more time. Laura joined me near the desk after finishing her photographs. We can send notice today, terminating their permission to use the property, she said. Legally, there is no reason to wait. I looked at the loan file, then at Thomas's notebook. I agree, I said. But before we do, I want Rachel to have one final chance to tell me the truth herself. On Sunday afternoon, I asked Rachel and Evan to meet me at the lake house. I chose the dining table because it was the same table where they had once moved Thomas's photograph aside to make room for Evan's folders. This time, the documents were mine. I placed the recorded deed in the center. Beside it were the lawyer's letter, the proposed LLC agreement, the bridge loan file, photographs of the new lock, and printed copies of Evan's emails to the attorney. Nathan did not come. I had told him I did not want the meeting to feel like a family ambush. Laura waited in the sitting room and would enter only if I asked. Rachel looked pale when she saw the papers. Evan remained standing. The loan file was only a backup plan, he said before I asked a question. A backup for what? Our company has had a difficult quarter. One contract was delayed and cash flow tightened. The loan would have been repaid within a year. You listed my house as collateral. After the transfer, he said, Rachel will inherit the property eventually. Using it now would have been a smart financial decision. Smart for whom? His jaw tightened. If the company fails, Rachel and the children suffer too. I was trying to protect my family. I turned to my daughter. How much did you know? Rachel stared at her hands. I knew the company was struggling. I knew Evan wanted the house transferred. I thought the LLC was about estate planning. Did you know he had already placed the property in a loan package? No. Did you know he changed the locks? She swallowed. Yes, he said it would prevent another argument. And I agreed because I did not want to fight with him. I let the silence remain between us. Did you ever tell Evan the house was not yours? Rachel opened her mouth, then closed it. Finally, she whispered. Part of me started believing it already belonged to us. There was the truth I had asked her to bring. It hurt more than an excuse, but it was cleaner. For 34 years, Thomas and I made decisions by asking what belonged to us, what belonged to others, and what responsibility required. Evan replaced those questions with one calculation. What could be used? Rachel allowed him to do it because the answer benefited her. I understood that love explained my patience, but it could no longer excuse their conduct or delay the boundary they forced me to draw. I slid a written list across the table. This is your final opportunity to correct what you have done. You will return every key. You will remove your belongings within 14 days. Evan's company will stop using this address. Both of you will sign a statement confirming that you have no ownership interest. Evan will notify the bank in writing that this property cannot be used as collateral. Rachel read the final paragraph. After 6 months, I continued, I may consider inviting you and the children back. Evan will not return unless I decide I feel safe with him here. Evan laughed without humor. This is absurd. Why are we pretending Rachel will not inherit the house anyway? I looked directly at him. An inheritance is a gift. It is not a debt the living owe to people waiting for them to die. Rachel's face crumpled. Mom, please do not make this bigger. Think about Lily and Noah. The children are not being punished. Their parents are losing a privilege they abused. Evan pushed the paper away. I am not signing anything today. Then Laura will communicate with you in writing. He glanced toward the sitting room, realizing for the first time that I had not come unprepared. He picked up his keys and walked out. Rachel remained seated for several seconds. I wanted her to stay. I wanted her to choose truth over the man who had taught her to confuse expectation with ownership. Instead, she followed him. 2 days later, Laura sent formal notice ending their permission to use the house as guests. They were given 14 days to collect their property under scheduled access. They complied. Though Evan complained through email and Rachel avoided speaking to me, they believed I wanted only to reclaim control of the house. Neither of them knew that after the final box left the driveway, I called a real estate agent. After Rachel and Evan removed the last box, I stayed at the lake house for a week. The silence felt different now. It was no longer peaceful. Every room carried the echo of an argument, a warning, or something I had allowed to go too far. The property had once represented freedom. Now it felt like a place I was maintaining to prove that Evan had failed to take it. That was not freedom. For several mornings, I walked from the kitchen to the dock, asking whether I loved the place itself or only the life it represented. One truth remained: I no longer felt at home in those rooms anymore. The land required more work each year. Fallen branches had to be cleared. The dock needed repairs. The long gravel drive washed out after heavy rain. I used the house only a few weeks each season, while my doctors, friends, and Nathan all lived much closer to Athens. The value had also risen far beyond what Thomas and I had imagined. Keeping the house simply to defeat Evan would still allow him to shape my decisions. I did not want the next chapter of my life to be built around proving anything to him. Caroline Price arrived on a clear Thursday morning. She was a local real estate agent who had spent 20 years selling homes around Lake Oconee. She walked through each room, studied the shoreline, reviewed the improvements, and sat with me on the porch. If the title is clean and the house is delivered vacant, she said, I would estimate the property to be just under $1 million. I had spent less than half that amount on the land and construction. Caroline already knew several cash buyers searching for a smaller lake cottage. She explained that the house did not need to be publicly listed for months. A private showing could lead to an offer quickly, but the process would still be handled properly. There would be an inspection, a title search, a signed purchase agreement, a final walkthrough, and a closing through an attorney. The house would be transferred empty, and the money would move through the closing office. 4 to 5 weeks, she estimated. I told her to begin, before the first showing. I packed what mattered. I took Thomas's black notebook, our photograph by the lake, the chipped coffee mug he had used every morning, and the reading chair he had drawn into the first plans, from the garage. I found a short board left over from the original porch construction and placed it with the things I would keep. Then I stood at the kitchen window where the morning light still crossed the floor exactly as Thomas had imagined. The dream was never only this house, Tom, I said. It was the feeling we wanted to create inside it. Selling did not feel like betraying him. I was refusing to let Evan's actions become the final chapter of something Thomas and I had built with love. Laura helped me revise my estate plan before the sale closed. My oldest will divide the lake house equally between Rachel and Nathan. My savings were also divided between them, with smaller gifts for Lily and Noah. Rachel had always been meant to receive half the house. I did not leave everything to Nathan simply because he had supported me. Respect was not a service for which a child should receive a financial prize. Instead, Part of the sale proceeds would fund protected education trusts for Lily and Noah. Rachel and Evan could not withdraw the money. Another portion would establish a nursing scholarship in Thomas's and my names. The rest would secure my medical care, housing, and independence for the years ahead. Caroline also found a smaller cottage in a gated lakeside community closer to Nathan and the hospital. It had 2 bedrooms, very little land to maintain, a quiet porch, and a kitchen window facing the water. I was not losing the lake. I was choosing another shore. A retired couple made a clean cash offer on the old house. After the inspection and title review, I signed the final documents on a Tuesday morning. 4 days later, Rachel and Evan drove back to the property, believing I had finally had enough time to forgive them. Rachel and Evan returned to the lake house on Saturday morning with Lily and Noah in the back seat. Lily carried a board game they always played on the porch, while Noah had packed his fishing hat. Neither child understood why their parents had spoken of the weekend as a return rather than a visit requiring my invitation and permission. They had convinced themselves I wanted an apology, not distance. Rachel believed I would miss the children too much to keep the boundary in place. Evan believed the house still belonged to the family in every way that mattered, even if the deed had never carried his name. The keypad rejected his code. He tried again, slower this time. A dark SUV sat inside the garage. Through the front window, Rachel could see that the curtains she had chosen were gone. A middle-aged man opened the door before Evan could knock. "There must be a mistake," Evan said. "This is our family's house." The man remained calm. "No mistake. My wife and I closed on Tuesday." Rachel called me immediately. "Mom, there are strangers inside the house," she said, her voice shaking. "They say they bought it. Did you really sell it?" "Yes." "Without telling us?" "The sale was legal, complete, and handled through a closing attorney." "But the children are here. We drove all this way. What are we supposed to do?" "What does every family do when a house does not belong to them?" I said. "Respect the owner." Rachel's breathing grew uneven. "You sold it without saying anything to us. You changed the locks without saying anything to me." Evan took the phone from her. "You have no idea what you've done," he said. "You destroyed my company. You damaged Rachel's future and the children's future because you wanted to prove a point. You did not lose your house. Evan, you lost access to mine." He started speaking, but I continued. "If your business could survive only by using an asset you never owned, the house is not what caused your company to fail." For once, Evan had no answer. The bank canceled the proposed bridge loan as soon as it confirmed that the property had been sold and had never been available as collateral. The investor who had relied on Evan's assurances demanded a full explanation. His business partner requested access to the company's books. That was when Rachel learned how much had been hidden from her. Evan had accumulated unpaid supplier balances, tax obligations, and short-term debt. He had used part of their joint savings to cover payroll without telling her. He had also promised an investor that the lake house would soon be transferred into an entity he controlled. There was no dramatic arrest and no police officer waiting outside his office. Consequences arrived more slowly. Mercer Commercial Renovations reduced its staff. Evans sold his luxury truck. The company gave up its leased office and moved into a smaller space. Several clients delayed signing new contracts after questions spread about his financial judgment. The worst damage was inside his marriage. Rachel could no longer separate the pressure Evan claimed to feel from the lies he had chosen to tell. Before they left the driveway, I asked to speak with Lily and Noah privately. Rachel handed them the phone. I told them the house now belonged to another couple and that they needed to be respectful of the new owners. I also told them they had done nothing wrong. "Grandma still loves you," I said. "Nothing happening between the adults changes that." Lily asked whether she would ever see me again. The question broke something open in my chest. "Of course you will," I said. "This house was one place where we made memories. It was never the reason I loved you." Noah asked whether the new family would use the dock. "I hope they do," I told him. "A house should be lived in." When Rachel took the phone back, she was crying. For the first time, I think she understood that I was protecting her children from a conflict she had helped create. I had separated their innocence from their parents' choices, even when she had used them to pressure me. "I'll call you later," she whispered. "Call when you are ready to tell the truth." 3 weeks passed. Then Rachel came to my new cottage alone. She did not bring Evan. She did not ask about the sale money. She came carrying a truth she had not previously been brave enough to admit. 3 weeks after the sale, Rachel arrived at my new cottage looking older than 39. There were shadows beneath her eyes, and she held her purse against her body as if it were the only thing keeping her upright. When I opened the door, she did not step inside until I moved aside. "I'm staying with a friend," she said once we sat at the kitchen table. "Evan and I are living separately for now." She did not begin by blaming him. Instead, she looked at her hands and named each thing she had done. "I knew he changed the locks, and I let it happen. I moved Dad's picture because I wanted the room to look like ours. I told Lily and Noah the house would belong to us someday. I knew the lawyer's letter felt wrong, but I stayed quiet. I liked the way people looked at us when they thought we owned that place. And when you pushed back, I used the children to make you feel guilty." Her voice broke, but she continued. "Evan suggested many things, but I agreed because I wanted to believe the house was already mine. The honesty hurt more than any excuse could have. It also gave us somewhere real to begin." I went to the desk and returned with a copy of my former will. I opened it to the section concerning the lake house and placed it in front of her. Rachel read the names twice. The property had been divided equally between her and Nathan. She looked up, stunned. "You were going to leave half of it to me? One day, you were almost certain to receive half," I said. "But you could not wait until it became a gift." She covered her mouth and began to cry. This time, I did not move around the table to comfort her. The consequences were not cruel. Sometimes they were the only proof that a boundary had finally become real. "Can you forgive me?" she asked. "I can begin forgiving you," I said. "But I cannot begin trusting you the way I did before." Then I explained what that meant. Rachel would not receive a key to my new home. Evan would not visit unless I invited him. We would not discuss the money from the sale. Visits with Lily and Noah could not be tied to financial requests, guilt, or pressure. Trust would return only through consistent actions, not promises made during a painful afternoon. Rachel nodded. She did not ask me to reconsider. The next 6 months were quiet and deliberate. There was no dramatic reconciliation, no single conversation that repaired everything. Some weeks felt hopeful, others felt strained. At times, I missed the easy closeness we once had. Yet I refused to trade temporary comfort for the old pattern in which silence protected everyone except the person being hurt most deeply. She called, but accepted it when I was not ready to talk. She brought Lily and Noah at agreed times and never used them to ask for money or access. She separated her finances from Evan's and required marriage counseling before discussing whether they would live together again. She apologized to Nathan without explaining her choices away. Sometimes she came alone to help me in the garden. One afternoon, while we were planting rosemary beside the porch. She reached for a chair blocking the walkway. Then she stopped. "May I move this?" It was only a few inches, but respect often returns through the smallest questions. Nathan never asked whether my revised estate plan gave him a larger share. "I don't need to be rewarded for doing what every child should do," he told me. That mattered. It reminded me that protecting myself did not require choosing one child over another. It required judging each person by their actions and refusing to confuse loyalty with obedience. A year after the first phone call, I invited the family to a small dinner at my cottage. Nathan arrived early. Rachel came later with Lily and Noah. Through the front window, I watched her stand on the porch. She had no key, and she did not try the handle. She knocked. Then she waited for me to invite her in. The cottage I bought was smaller than the lake house, but it fit the life I was living now. My doctors were 20 minutes away. Nathan lived close enough to stop by after work. The community had neighbors who waved during evening walks, a shoreline, and a path that curved beside the water. There was no large property to maintain, no long gravel drive to repair, and no dock demanding another season of work. There was still a porch facing the lake. There was still a kitchen window that caught the morning sun, on the sill. I placed Thomas's black notebook above the old reading chair. I hung the photograph of us standing beside the water before illness rearranged our lives. The leftover board from the original porch became a narrow shelf for his coffee mug and several books. The old house had not vanished completely. It continued in the things worth carrying. For our family dinner, Nathan and his wife arrived first. Rachel came later with Lily and Noah. Evan did not attend. I had not invited him, and Rachel did not argue. When I opened the door, she waited until I stepped aside. The children ran through the cottage and onto the porch. Their laughter moved across the water, lighter than I remembered it sounding at the old house. During dessert, Lily looked toward the lake. "Grandma, are you still sad you sold the other house?" "I was sad for a while," I said. "But sometimes a place finishes the work it was meant to do in your life. Then you have to let yourself move forward." She considered that answer before asking whether this lake had fish. Nathan laughed and promised to find out with her in the morning. Rachel was still living apart from Evan and deciding what their marriage could become after so much secrecy. Evan had sold part of his company to a partner and used the money to reduce its debts months earlier. He had sent me a letter apologizing for crossing boundaries and frightening me. I had not answered it. Peace did not require everyone to understand me, and forgiveness did not require access to my life. I had protected part of the sale proceeds in independent education trusts for Lily and Noah. Their parents could not withdraw the money or use it to repair their finances. The children would not be punished for choices they had never made. The nursing scholarship in Thomas's and my names had also accepted its first recipient, a young woman working nights while completing her degree. Thomas's dream no longer lived in only one building. It was helping someone else construct a future. After dinner, Rachel gathered the children's jackets. A spare key rested in a small dish near the door. I saw her glance at it, then look away. She did not ask. I did not offer it. But as she stepped onto the porch, I said, "Call me when you get home." Her face softened. "I will, Mom." Love was returning. Access had not. Later, after the house grew quiet, I sat outside and watched the moon stretch across the lake. I once believed I had broken the family by selling the old cottage. With time, I understood that the fracture had begun much earlier, when gratitude became an expectation and kindness was treated like a contract. The house had not been wasted or lost. It had kept Thomas's dream alive long enough for me to finish it. It had given our family summers filled with food, games, and children running barefoot toward the water. And when love became confused with ownership, it taught me that my life still belonged to me. I had spent most of my years caring for people in pain. Only at 67 did I understand that compassion does not require us to stand still while someone hurts us. Forgiveness can reopen the heart. It does not have to return the key. And an inheritance, whether it is a home, money, or a dream, remains a gift from the person who created it, not a right belonging to those waiting to receive it. If a relative changed the locks on a house that belonged to you, would you keep it, sell it, or offer one final chance? Share your answer in the comments. If you believe kindness must always be protected by clear boundaries, like this video and subscribe for more stories about family, dignity, justice, and the courage to begin again.